You know what's genuinely funny? Tell someone you prefer winter, and their face does this thing like you just said you enjoy doing taxes for fun. There's this immediate suspicion, like something went wrong somewhere in your development, and they're trying to figure out exactly where. But there are a non-trivial number of people on this planet who, when the temperature drops and the sky goes that flat, heavy gray, feel something that can only be described as relief. And the question I want to dig into is why? Because if you're one of those people, you've probably never been able to fully explain it. You just feel it, and everyone else thinks you're odd because of it. Well, you're not. You might actually be one of the more psychologically self-aware people in the room. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Let's start with the thing people don't say out loud enough, which is that a lot of winter prefers aren't just drawn to cold, they're being repelled by heat. And those are meaningfully different experiences. One is an aesthetic preference. The other is a physical reality that gets dismissed like it's weakness, when it's actually just a nervous system doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Heat, and I mean real summer heat, not a warm bath, is a physiological stressor. Sweating through your clothes before 9 a.m., headaches that arrive uninvited and stay all day. That specific kind of irritability that doesn't have a target but needs one. The way your sleep just deteriorates. You wake up in a wet tangle and somehow you're supposed to be grateful that it's sunny. The bright, unfiltered light alone can feel like something drilling into your skull if you're even mildly sensitive to sensory input. Summer people thrive in that. Good for them, genuinely. But if you've spent summers feeling overstimulated and vaguely guilty about it, the arrival of cold air isn't a mood, it's oxygen. Speaking of which, most people have heard of seasonal affective disorder in winter. Fewer know there's a recognized summer pattern version, sometimes called reverse SAD, where heat and extended daylight trigger real depressive and anxiety symptoms. Psychiatrist Norman Rosenthal, who first formally described SAD in 1984, had already identified the summer variant by 1989. It's less studied, but it's real. It's documented. And for the people who experience it, every summer is something to survive rather than enjoy. If that landed somewhere specific for you, worth paying attention to. Summer also has this tax that nobody lists in the brochure. Good weather apparently means your time belongs to everyone. Rooftop bars appear on your calendar without your consent. Group trips get floated, and suddenly you're the difficult one for hesitating. There's a whole cultural logic where sunlight equals obligation, and opting out of it feels vaguely irresponsible, like you're misusing a resource. Winter revokes that. The city quiets down, the invitations thin out, and your evenings stop being something other people schedule for you. For a particular kind of person, that's not a loss. That's the whole point of winter. And look, it's not a hatred of people. Plenty of winter people are genuinely warm, socially engaged humans. What they struggle with is the compulsory version, the socializing that shows up whether you wanted it or not, delivered by the season like junk mail. Winter is the unsubscribe button. You still go out, you just go out on purpose. The research here is interesting. A 2015 study by Oishi found that introverts consistently preferred secluded, enclosed environments and were measurably happier in them. Winter does exactly this to a landscape, closes things down, creates enclosure, narrows the visible world, drops the noise. The whole sensory load of being alive in public just recedes. The short version of the neuroscience: people differ meaningfully in how much environmental input their nervous system can process before it tips into strain. Summer maximizes that input. Winter reduces it. And for a lot of people, that reduction isn't deprivation, it's calibration. But I want to push past the introvert framing because it's a little too tidy, and the reality is weirder and more interesting. There's a subset of winter preferers who aren't particularly introverted at all. What they share instead is a very specific relationship with permission. Modern life runs on performance, productivity, visibility, momentum, and summer amplifies all of it. The long days feel like a moral argument for doing more, more, more. Even your leisure has to look effortful. There's a quiet guilt that lives inside a sunny Saturday spent doing nothing, because every hour of daylight feels borrowed. Winter cancels that debt. The darkness comes early, the cold gives you a reason to stay in, and the world kind of implicitly agrees that slowing down is acceptable. For people who are chronically hard on themselves, who struggle to rest without justification, winter is the only season that hands them one for free. External permission to be a human being instead of a productivity metric. And people don't always recognize this in themselves, which is part of why I, just like the cold, is the only explanation they can give. The real thing running underneath is closer to, I feel less guilty existing slowly when the world looks like this. There's also something worth saying about aesthetics, and not in a fluffy way. People who love winter often describe it in terms that sound almost meditative. The quiet after heavy snowfall, the way sound gets absorbed, the particular color of light at 400 p.m. in December, that specific blue-gray that sits just before dark, which is honestly kind of extraordinary if you've ever stopped to notice it. Attunement to that kind of detail, the quieter, slower, more overlooked kind, tends to track with a particular cognitive style, depth over breadth, absorption over scanning. The kind of person who reads the last chapter of a book twice, or notices a change in someone's tone before they finish the sentence. Winter rewards that style of attention in a way that summer, with its constant foreground noise, simply doesn't. And then there's identity. Summer comes with a costume. A whole performance is expected. The social version of you, the active version, the one with plans and enthusiasm for things that happen outdoors in direct sunlight. A lot of people wear that costume just fine. Some find it exhausting in ways they can't quite put language to. Winter, gives you your actual face back, the version that exists at home in your own rhythm without an audience. And for people whose inner life is richer than their outer presentation, which is more people than you'd think, that return feels like taking off shoes you've been wearing for 6 months straight. None of this means summer people have it wrong. Some nervous systems genuinely bloom under stimulation and warmth. The culture we've built, particularly in the West, has historically been far more hospitable to them, which is part of why winter people often move through the world with this low-level sense of being slightly out of step. If you've watched this far, I'd be willing to bet you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I don't mean that as a vague gesture at some imagined viewer. If this has felt less like information and more like recognition, welcome. Winter lovers aren't miserable people hiding from life. A lot of them are people who've spent years inside environments calibrated for someone else's nervous system, someone else's social appetite and definition of a good time. And for a few months a year, the world reorganizes itself around theirs. The gray skies are not a problem to be solved. They never were. One last reminder, and I only bring up things I'd actually put in front of you. There's a link in the description to a bundle I think a lot of you will find genuinely useful. If this video resonated, there's a decent chance your brain runs hot. It notices more, processes longer, and doesn't switch off easily, which tends to mean sleep is harder than it should be. Focus is inconsistent, and rest never quite feels restful. The bundle covers exactly that. A sleep guide, a dopamine reset, a focus rebuild, and a mental clarity planner. Each with daily actions, not just information. Because information without structure is just more noise. Pinned in the comments too, worth a look.